And we are just one day away from the NFL trade deadline. Already some big moves with Von Miller headed to the Rams. But what else could we expect in the next 24 hours or so? Amanda Guerra, Brady Quinn. We have a trio of experts with us. We are also joined by our NFL insiders, Jonathan Jones and Josina Anderson. So Von Miller to the Rams. The Rams tweeted out a couple hours ago, all in, cute little gif. What do you think about it?
It's just a Les Snead move. I mean, this is what they do when they feel like they've got an edge with their opportunity to go improve their roster. Les Snead goes out and he does it, and he just gives away all those future draft picks. Because look, they've got veteran staples and really cornerstones on that defense, on offense they can rely on. So now it's just about putting that group together and seeing the chemistry and seeing what they're capable of doing. But bottom line is, if you're looking at that NFC West, to me, you know, with the way the Cardinals have lost recently and looking at the Rams now and their resurgence, same record, and even though we have the head-to-head play, you'd have to give the edge to the Rams now moving forward. You know, they're getting one of the better edge rushers in NFL history. The Cardinals on the other side are losing J.J. Watt for the rest of the year. So you got one team ascending, the other team maybe a bit on the decline right now, but this is a huge move, and I don't think we're done in the NFL yet either. I think we're going to see some more action here as we get closer to the deadline.
A busy day over the next 24 hours. Jonathan Jones, you were able to confirm this trade very early for us. What else do we need to know about it?
Well, it's one that, again, Brady just touched on why the Rams are being so aggressive, and maybe I'll take the other angle of it, and it's the Denver Broncos. Hey, you're still kind of in it, right? Why don't you hang on to Von Miller, try to get into the playoffs, maybe make some noise, get him to join forces with Bradley Chubb? Well, what they have here is a first-year GM in George Paton who's saying, listen, I'm going to be honest about where my team is, and we weren't going to re-sign Von Miller in this offseason. And so if we can unload him, eat the salary that we were already going to eat anyway, it was a sunk cost, and get a second and a third round pick out of it, it's a no-brainer sort of deal for the Denver Broncos. And on top of that, the Denver Broncos are thinking long-term here, not just, all right, maybe we get into the playoffs, maybe we don't, but don't be at all surprised to see them flip these two picks, this second and a third round pick, when they go in pursuit of a quarterback next offseason. Might that be Aaron Rodgers? He has to be at the top of their list. Perhaps a Russell Wilson. And, of course, I know we're going to talk about Deshaun Watson today, but if he is still with the Houston Texans and going to be dealt come next March, maybe that's the guy that they target. So a fantastic deal, in my opinion, for the Denver Broncos. They're not a better team today without Von Miller, no question about it, but they're set up much better in the future by making this deal.
A lot of news today around the NFL, including Derrick Henry getting surgery on his foot. No timetable for his return. Very unlikely we're going to see him at all this season. And this afternoon, the Titans signing Adrian Peterson. Josina, I know you were on the phone with him for a while there today. Sent out some interesting tweets. What did he tell you?
Yeah, well, I was talking to Adrian Peterson right as he was getting into Tennessee, and then he, texted me right after he completed his workout, and he knew that the signing was going to be inevitable. Matter of fact, he knew that he was going to be with the Tennessee Titans because he packed enough clothes to stay there. So he wasn't expecting anything else when you consider that the position that they're in. But when I talked to him, he was just acknowledging that this is just really a good opportunity for him to be in his 14th season, to contribute to a team that he feels like is a contender. He's had to wait a long time, to kind of get back after contributing to the Lions last season and having 600 rush yards. Matter of fact, the last time that he was able to get over 1,000 yards is in his first year with the Washington football team. And I wanted to say really quickly that even in that situation, he kind of had to wait for the Washington football team to be sure that he could kind of come out of his future Hall of Fame, lore, so to speak, and still contribute to this team when they were looking at Orleans Dark, where they were looking at Jamal Charles. Now you're looking at a team in a desperate situation with Derrick Henry out. Even Adrian Peterson told me himself that the team has big shoes to fill in terms of, kind of contributing where Derrick Henry now cannot, with the 937 plus rush yards that lead the NFL and the 10 rushing touchdowns as well.
I cannot imagine that the Tennessee Titans are going to do anything differently. They're not going to change who they are as an offense, whether they have Adrian Peterson, who they're going to bring on to the practice squad and work him into football shape, obviously very much in fantastic shape. We know how well he keeps his body in shape. But as they sort of ramp him up, whether it was going to be Adrian Peterson, whether they were going to make a trade, whether they still maybe make a trade and send some day 3 pick for yet another running back in the time that they can still do it in these next 24 hours, the Tennessee Titans aren't all of a sudden going to be throwing the football all around the yard. They don't care that they have A.J. Brown and Julio Jones to throw to 45, 50 times a game. Mike Vrabel made it very clear today. We are still going to be who we are. Maybe some slight tweaks and changes, no question about it, but this is not going to change this team's identity as an offense. So I still anticipate them to be a run-heavy offense. I wouldn't necessarily call it a run-first. You can't replace Derrick Henry one-to-one with really anybody that's going to be made available in the next day or in the next couple of months, but they are going to remain who they are in Tennessee.
Brady, we had on Pete and Jamie before this became official. Words they used: old, slow, decrepit was thrown out there. But
wait a minute, that's what they said about Adrian?
Those are some words that were used. What do you think?
Good thing he's not listening to this. Well, I'll just have to add this story because, like, when I was talking about him, potentially coming to the Washington football team at the time, and that was 2 seasons ago or what have you, the front office for the Washington football team was not really convinced on bringing Adrian in terms of, like I said, would he defer, what kind of shape he was in. And I remember talking to sources in the front office at that time, and I was just like, looking at Jamal Charles, looking at Orleans Darkwa. And then he came in, he did the workout, and then he blew them away. And it's kind of like today when he worked out for the Titans, he went in there with that same mentality, like, once you see me work out in person, it's a done deal. So one thing that you don't want to discount Adrian for is, even if he's not Adrian of old, is how he takes care of his body. And you know that regardless of it maybe not being the year when it was, I think, 2012, when he had the 2,000 plus rushing yard season, he's still going to be able to probably drop down 700, 800 out of his sleep.
All right, so a boost there for Adrian Peterson and the way he takes care of his body. What do you think?
Well, no one's going to question whether or not he comes in shape. I mean, the guy's an absolute specimen. He always has been. So he's going to be in shape. Is he in football shape? That's really the question. And it's hard to get in football shape unless you're out there playing. So he's going to have to get up to speed relatively quickly. I think the hard part about that is this is an offense that's been extremely reliant on the running back position. And so for Adrian Peterson to have to fill in those big shoes, which he admitted, it's going to be tough to do. And especially considering that Derrick Henry, too, had that extra gear where you'd be able to see a lot of those big runs come from. Does Adrian Peterson still have that in the tank? I think that's more of the question here. And now we're going to take a look at some of the stats with and without Derrick Henry. So as much as we want to act like this Tennessee Titans offense isn't going to change, it's going to have to, because you're not going to get those same big runs. You're not going to be able to hand the football off to an older running back the age of Adrian Peterson 30-plus times a game like you could with Derrick Henry. And so I think that's the biggest thing right now is Adrian Peterson's going to be the guy, or at least one of the guys. This is probably going to look more like a running back by committee if the Tennessee Titans want to keep hammering away with the rushing attack. And then once Julio Jones gets back healthy, combined with A.J. Brown, their other weapons, it's going to put more pressure on Ryan Tannehill. Bottom line is this injury immediate forced and really thrust Ryan Tannehill to the forefront, where he's got to be the guy now to lead this offense. He's going to have to pitch in too, keeping the football and running from time to time, adding to that rushing attack if this team is going to stay at top of the AFC South and make any sort of run in the playoffs this year.
So Derrick Henry will have surgery on his foot, another surgery that will be happening. Jameis Winston will have surgery because he has a torn ACL, officially out for the season. Josina, you reported earlier, they're not going to pursue Cam Newton. They have a lot of faith in Taysom Hill, expected to return. What else can you tell us?
Well, yeah, I actually heard last night, that they were regarding it as a season-ending ACL injury with damage to the MCL. And as far as also their perspective with how they want to handle the loss of Jameis Winston, which is to look internal first with the combination of Taysom Hill, who's been out since October 10th in that game where he suffered a concussion against the Washington football team, who's expected to return this season, and also Trevor Siemian, who was obviously on the field last night when they were able to come back and beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's a lot of faith that this team has in both of them. The biggest question that I heard illuminated for me last night was more so, who's going to be the starter at quarterback? Your first thought would be Taysom Hill, just because that's what you're familiar with. But you have to remember that, Taysom Hill is also considered a switchblade for this team, can obviously perform in multiple roles. So it's not necessarily definitive that that's the position he'll start at. Doesn't mean that you won't see him under center. but just means that that's the looming question and could still ultimately end up starting as well. It's just not definitive at this point in time. And as far as what you were saying with regards to Cam Newton, yes, the team is not inclined to look in that direction at this time. If something else happens that is not expected with regards to another injury at the position, you never know what can happen then, but definitely not looking there right now.
I think that it's ultimately going to be Taysom if and when he gets healthy. Obviously, that's a when he gets healthy. Trevor Siemian looked really, really good yesterday in sort of the week of the backup quarterbacks around the NFL. And I won't at all be surprised if he gets the nod this upcoming week as Taysom goes through the concussion protocol, continues to ramp up and get up to speed. But you know, Sean Payton, no matter what anyone thinks about Taysom Hill, Sean Payton believes in Taysom Hill, and he has said that with his words over the last couple of years, but more importantly, he said it with his actions. I go back to last year when we thought it was going to be Jameis Winston when Drew Brees went down, and they went with Taysom Hill. I go back to the preseason where it was as legitimate a quarterback competition as one can have. And Brady, I know you were part of a couple of quarterback competitions. There's no real great way to have a quarterback competition in the NFL in preseason and in training camp. I thought Sean Payton did as fair and as good a job as he could have, and it became clear that Jameis Winston was the guy there, and he earned that role to be number one. But Sean has a history of loving Taysom Hill, of giving him the football when he believes in him, and I think when he gets out of protocol and when he's ready to take the reins, that ultimately it will be him.
I think he gives them the best chance to win. I mean, this is a playoff team we're talking about. The Saints have solidified themselves, at least in the NFC playoff picture, as one of those teams. So really, who gives you the most upside? To me, that's Taysom Hill. Now, the offense is going to change, and we saw it change a bit. I think we saw some of the limitations of Taysom Hill when he was able to start last year. Even though they were able to win some games, he was able to be successful. The reality is they need Michael Thomas back. They need some more playmakers on the outside if they're going to be able to make this offense work with Taysom Hill, because he's not going to just be able to run essentially a wildcat offense or hand the football off and win football games. That's just not how the NFL works. Teams are too good. They already adapted that style of play last year. He's going to have to grow and progress, or they're going to have a bunch of weapons on the outside of just Alvin Kamara, even Mark Ingram now, who's coming back to help out in the backfield to help lift this passing game up, because they don't necessarily have a quarterback who can do it on his own. And so that's really more the concern I have, I think, for this team at this point. But Taysom Hill gives them the best chance of trying to make some waves and win some football games, not only the rest of this season, but once they get in the postseason. Really, that's what this is all about in my mind.
All right, 24 hours about away from the trade deadline. The biggest name we've been talking about so far this season. Will he be moved? Deshaun Watson. Josina, you and I talked at length about him last week because there was a lot of chatter about him and the Dolphins. Things have quieted down since. We were in that final 24 hours. What do you know, Josina?
Well, it's interesting. Last night I got a text from a source that said no movement. And then right before I came on the air with you guys just now, I got another text that said no movement. And they gave me a % chance with it not happening. I won't repeat that here because I always like to leave a caveat, with regards to anything. And which is also why I wanted to wait till Sunday, because as I was saying, when I'm on the phone with these sources and I talk to you guys, you always want to collect as much information and data as you can. And look, 24 hours ago, no one anticipated that Jameis Winston would be out. So not that that's impacting with regards to Deshaun Watson, but just illuminating the fact as far as why you wait. And so the thing that I find interesting as far as what I'm looking at is the people that I talk to, I would say right now, they're all hunkered down. I haven't heard much from them with respect to, forwarding it. And so when the benchmark that I feel like I use when I'm listening to my sources is whether something is imminent and whether something is substantive enough to actually happen. So when people are texting me no movement, they don't necessarily mean that discussions aren't happening. They mean that it's like nothing is at the point of, actually being executed, right this second. I will say that if at some point the Houston Texans get the compensation level that they feel is adequate and represents what they feel like is the value of Deshaun Watson, then this will absolutely happen. I've continued to tell you today that, that especially the back half of that compensation package has not, met the mark. And absolutely, as I said 3 days ago, that the Texans feel no pressure to get a deal done with regards to Deshaun Watson prior to the November 2nd deadline as well, just when you're looking at the trajectory of their season and also with the value that they place on Deshaun Watson.
And they're comfortable paying his salary and having him sit out. They've already done it for half the season. They're fine with doing it for the second half of the season and sort of withstanding the embarrassment that comes along with that. I'm told that owner Cal McNair, and it was reported as well over the weekend, that he would prefer it that Deshaun Watson be traded, that he could rid himself of this and sort of clean his hands of it, if you will. It's not going to be that simple. GM Nick Caserio is holding out for what he considers and what he deems to be proper value for one of the best young quarterbacks in the entire NFL, and frankly, one of the best quarterbacks, no modifier necessary, in the NFL. But Nick is playing somewhat of a dangerous game because Deshaun very clearly wants to go to Miami. Well, if it doesn't happen with the Miami Dolphins, then it's not going to happen. In my opinion, I believe that it's he at 4:01 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, he is either a Houston Texan or he is a Miami Dolphin, understanding that anything in the world can happen between now and then. I do think that those are the two reasonable outcomes here. So maybe Nick needs to come down a little bit off of the price. I'm not sure the Dolphins are going to go up any more on it, but as we all know, in all walks of life, deadline spurs action. So we certainly will see here in the coming hours.
And that's right. We're not quite to that deadline yet, but I do think there will be a little bit more action here in the coming hours, or at least the best and final offer from any of those teams who are looking at trying to get Deshaun Watson. And look, maybe even Deshaun Watson and his agent talked, and he said maybe we can remove it for other teams outside of Miami if we truly want to get out of Houston. I do think the risk that Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans are running right now is if you hold on to him and pay him for the rest of the year and you go into next offseason, obviously there's potential legal ramifications. We all know about that. There's also competition, though. You could be maybe having Russell Wilson move from Seattle, maybe Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers. If that happens and you've got your pick of the three, even though you've got a young Deshaun Watson who's no doubt one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league who's under contract, he's got some legal issues. And in comparison to the other two, he's going to lose every single time. And you might find a lot of teams who want to potentially look elsewhere to bring in their next quarterback. So that's a risk that I think Nick Caserio and the Houston Texans have to weigh, because right now there's no competition. I mean, they've probably got a number of teams who've provided them an offer. It may not be exactly what they want, but it may be better than what they're able to get for Deshaun Watson if they wait, depending on how the legal thing plays out and then what happens with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson after the season.
All right, you said.
Can I just add to that really quickly? I just want to say that, based on the conversations that I had, I really want to just illuminate this. I'm just not just saying it to say it. They do not feel any pressure. I'm going to tell you that they do not feel any pressure. They can go past this deadline and feel comfortable in what they feel like. When I say they have a value literally assessed down to the dollar of what, they feel like Deshaun Watson is. As far as as a resource asset player, obviously in this league, they understand exactly what that is. So when I say they don't feel pressure, that's my understanding per my conversations, that they do not feel that pressure. So the literal way that this will happen is if the price is met, 5 minutes from now, if the price is met, boom, it'll happen. If the price is not met, boom, it will not happen. I think one of the biggest things that we should be paying attention to is if there's just anything that happens to change with regards to the cases. And if Deshaun Watson just somehow changes his mind in terms of that non-disclosure agreement contingency that in the past has been connected to getting these civil settlements done. That, as I have said multiple times, is really the only path right now for getting additional clarity, to any of these owners who have that residual discomfort, and so that could be, other than meeting the price, that's the other thing that I would be looking to is, trying to see what updates I could get from the lawyers.
And look, the Texans may hold strong with what they believe to be as a fair offer, but that might change in the future in the offseason. Like I said, again, things change. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff could happen in the offseason with other quarterbacks who may be more desirable to some of those teams who are looking to make a replacement. Well,
Josina, I know the one thing you've said over and over again, the Texans right now not moving on the price for Deshaun Watson. All right, Josina Anderson, Jonathan Jones, thank you guys so much for joining us. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.